Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, with Dr. Lopkin. And Dr. Eric Lopkin, I'll throw it out to you first. I want your unbridled view on what happened in New Hampshire.
New Hampshire was an interesting story. Um, I believe it, at least in my lifetime, and possibly quite a bit longer, this was the first time a Republican won both Iowa and New Hampshire,
It is.
and certainly by such a margin. So Trump's victory was quite a feat, and it really does show the power he has behind with his political movement behind him. What I
Let's
actually
face it, the Republican, wait, but real quick, do you agree with me that the Republican Party is now Trump? He is reinvented, and the people like, Kasich and what's his name from the National Review, their days are gone. The country club, open borders Republicans. Check, please.
Yeah, it's a different party. And when you hear Biden talk, oh, the evil MAGA Republicans, the MAGA
Yeah.
let's not forget, MAGA stands for Make America Great Again. Shouldn't everybody want to make America great? Shouldn't every American be part of MAGA? We all want America to be
No,
great
I
again.
disagree with you. I disagree with you because I'm not so sure a lot of liberal Democrats, the AOC, Hamas wing, the Davos elitists that just met last week, I'm not so sure they really, and their policies are totally, against America being great or being great again. So I'm not so sure. Yeah, you would think most Americans, but I think the liberal wing, and that's increasingly getting larger and larger, of the Democratic Party, I'm not so sure they're on board with that.
It's very possible. Uh, I believe it was during the um, primary coverage last night. Charles Payne, we've talked about him in the past.
Yeah, I like them.
I used to work with him. He very, very well defined what MAGA really is about. And it's people that want to be able to bring in enough money to live on. It's people
There you
that
go.
want their kids to do better than they are doing. And
Yes.
it is absolutely amazing how the left-wing media and of course the Democratic Party have really
They're one
tried
and the
to
same, by the way.
change that definition. But what really interested me last night, and I think it's something that Republicans need to pay attention to, and quite frankly, I found this a little scary, was how well Joe Biden did in the Democratic primary. Okay, New Hampshire was basically told by Biden and the DNC to go to hell. We're not going to bother with you. We're not going to compete in your primary because you're not doing what we tell you to do. And yet, Biden was able to win the primary as a write in candidate. How stupid do you have to be to write in the name of a candidate that has already told you to go to hell?
It's not uncommon. I mean, the Democratic Party is super delegates, so on. The list goes on. When you look at this, first of all, there's a huge campaign, certainly well above triple figures, instructing the geniuses slash morons on how to write in. And who knows with the Democrats? Did they get cell phones? I don't know. Did they get Obama cash? So you never really know.
It's
And
true,
was it
but
printed on a printing press? Who knows? I
yeah,
mean, so I actually think that I'm not that enamored with that. I actually think it's a cautionary note, and I forgot his name, and he's really interesting because when you listen to him, he's like the Democratic Party of like the 1980s,
yeah,
70s, what
Dean.
have you, maybe 90s. Yeah, and he got almost 20%. don't know about that. And he just came on board not too long ago. So Uncle Joe, I'm not so sure about. And when you look at a recent poll, I believe it might be Quinnipiac. Trump is nationwide, not in just New Hampshire. He's up by 11 with independents, and independents, we talked about this last week, is a increasingly, I think it outdoes both parties at this point, or close to it. So he's up
Oh
by
no,
11
it does outdo both parties right now,
and growing.
and we mentioned this last week. Independent is now over 40% of the country.
There you
So
go.
so you are talking about a major factor. People who have said, you know what? We are tired of both of these parties. We are tired
As it
of
should be.
yeah, we are tired of the deep state. I mean, I dropped my party affiliation years ago. I was once a Democrat, I was once a Republican, and now I've had it with both of them and have for numerous years.
Yes, the only caveat I would say to that, and I agree 100% with that, um, but I have to say the Democrats have left the reservation a lot more than the Republicans. I can tolerate, I need to listen, I agree
Yes.
with your independent approach 100%. But when you look at the Meshuggah factor, just to get a little Jewish reference in here. Yes, I think the Democrats are basically, a lot of them are suitable for a long stay at an institution and bring the luggage because it's going to be a while. So yeah, I think, and I think that, why do I mention that? Because I think when you look at Trump being up by 11, I think more people are they're turned off by both parties. I'm not going to, obviously you are correct, but I think they're more turned off by what, even at the grassroots, what really counts. Being told to drive an EV, being told that your voice doesn't count in schools and you should be taught, LBGQXL7 versus, the what, writing, I can't even say it anymore because it's never been talked
Reading,
about for
writing,
like
and
10 years.
arithmetic. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin. Yes, but you get the point. So I think at the grassroots
Yeah, but
level, I think the Democrats have done more to turn people off.
well, they have. We talked about that last week, where more Democratic people that identify as Democrats are at the lowest point since, I believe it was 1991. But I think
Mhm.
more than that, it goes to show why Trump has such a political movement.
There you
Because
go.
realistically, even though Trump is running as a Republican, Trump is not a Republican. Trump is an independent. He is anti deep state. He
And populist.
represents, yes, he represents everything that the independents have said. We need more of this. We are tired of the elites in both parties. And we're starting to see. I mean, you mentioned, the mainstream media is, basically the same as the Democratic Party. I don't know if you're familiar with Tiffany Cross.
No, I'm not.
Tiffany Cross is a former MSNBC anchor. She was let
Oh,
go
yes, I
2 years.
just read an article on her. Yes.
Yes,
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah.
she was let go 2 years ago. And she just recently started speaking out about MSNBC because they were trying to indoctrinate her into anti Trump. They wanted everything she said on her show to be anti Trump. Didn't matter what the truth was. Now, Tiffany Cross is an African American woman. Okay. So she basically, if you want to tick boxes, she ticks all the same boxes as Joy Reid, but she was an independent thinker and she was an actual reporter. And MSNBC couldn't deal with that, so they didn't renew her contract, and now she's speaking out about it.
Well, I may interject one thing about that. First of all, I applaud her and I applaud that ex ESPN. She's also African American, totally awesome thinker and very bright person, both of them. Um, but when you talk about thinker, you really don't want to mention MSNBC in the same breath. I mean, Rachel Maddow, the Joe, whatever the other idiot you mentioned. These people. I mean, if you want to like smoke some pot and have a good laugh, fine, I'll give you that all day long. But to actually sit down and think you're digesting news, I'm sorry to say, I usually am not this black and white, but you are a moron.
Yeah, no, MSNBC is not about news.
Not even real.
It is about propaganda. And in fact, we've talked about this in the past how Rachel Maddow actually won a case in court. She was charged with defamation of character, and she won the case because the court found she was not a reporter. She just gives her opinion.
Yes, very interesting, but also on the same kind of plane. People turning that once were embraced by the liberal intelligentsia. We have Fetterman, who didn't have a brain like about a year ago, but has actually got his brain kind of back in gear. They loved him. Isn't this funny? They loved the guy when he couldn't put two sentences together. I wonder where that harkens back to, but anyway, we'll leave that alone for a second at least. But now he starts speaking out for Israel, against terrorism, maybe for like maybe having some kind of a rational border strategy, and they hate the son of a bitch now. They
It,
loved him. They thought he would be the next president.
it is amazing how that has turned around. And, we spoke out a lot against Fetterman, and I am glad he is recovering. I am glad he's getting his faculties back. I still stand by my original assessment that after the stroke, he should have pulled out of the race, taken the time to recover, and then run in a future election. But I am glad that, his the damage he suffered was not permanent. But let's face it, after the stroke, he became the poster child for everything the Democrats have been pushing. He was incapable of doing the job by himself. He needed help. He was a victim, according to the Democrats. How could you speak out against him? He's a victim of the stroke.
And he
And
could be controlled too.
yes, and he was that poster child for victimhood. And then he started to recover. And I don't know if he was on medication or if he did, physical therapy or what his recovery mode was, but he took control of his condition and he started to recover, which is exactly the opposite of what Democrats preach. Oh, no, you can't do this on your own. You need our help. You need government's help. And Fetterman just proved, no, you don't. And now he's speaking out against all of the shit they've been pushing, and they
And they
can't
hate him.
stand him. Yeah.
Yeah, they hate the son of a bitch. So I think it's really hysterical, though, but it shows you how, like I talked about, the independents and how really the Democrats have left the reservation a lot in greater magnitude than the Republicans. We'll just leave it at that. But it shows you he's definitely left of center, and you could say maybe a little bit far left of center, and yet he's a
I,
counter voice to I'll tell you left of center, maybe not far left of
yeah,
center.
I
But the
don't
point
think
is,
he's.
the Democratic, but the Democratic Party has gotten so out of control and so driven by Bernie's socialist agenda that he's basically an arch conservative in their eyes.
Yeah, it
That's
is
the real
hysterical.
takeaway. It's crazy.
Yeah, he is left of center. He's not far left by any stretch
Yeah,
of
okay,
the
I'll give you that. Yep.
imagination. And honestly, I would compare him to Bill Clinton after the shellacking in the midterms when he turned things around, and even the positions of the Kennedys. He's an old school Democrat. He's not one of these new far left wackos. And I think the election is going to be very interesting because we've said this before. We've heard it from a lot of Democrats, especially in the media. I didn't leave the party left me. Well, one of the people that keeps saying that and keeps going at has been going after the Democrats is returning to television. And I don't know, this was just announced a few hours ago. But Jon Stewart is going to be
Great.
hosting The Daily Show every Monday night until the election, at least until the election. So Jon Stewart is going to be back on television, back on Comedy Central, and he has said, the Democrats left him. He didn't leave the Democrats. So you're going to see, let's face it, more people got their news from Jon Stewart when he hosted The Daily Show than they did from MSNBC and CNN combined. So I think
I
it's
think
going
that
to
is an exceptionally great point. Yes, go ahead.
so
Sorry.
I think it's going to be very interesting watching this election when you have Bill Maher every week commenting, when you have Jon Stewart every week commenting. These are folks that they're not Trump supporters by any stretch of the imagination, but they're not going to just fall in line and support the Democratic Socialists.
I think that's an excellent point, and you have it even more far-reaching than that. And your point is absolutely well-founded. But Stewart was and probably still will be an influencer, especially with young people. But you look at others: Charlemagne the God, 50 Cent. I mean, the list goes on in traditional Democratic bastions, and it's fracturing. It's a bridge too far. And it's because of their policies. Look at open immigration. There's leaders, African American leaders in Chicago, saying it ain't going to be a copacetic convention in the summer because we're pissed. You're letting, basically illegal aliens having more, financial aid and the things that should be going to us to give us a leg up, plus the whole problem with violence and, living in a dangerous neighborhood. If you really cared about us, and what the hell's going on?
Yeah, and talking about immigration, that was something else that was very interesting that came out of last night's primary. 40% of New Hampshire voters ranked immigration as the number one issue. New Hampshire has never worried about immigration before. This is now a national issue, not just the southern border, not just Texas, not just Florida, and not just Republicans. This is now a major issue because we have had millions of gotaways that they don't know who they are, they don't know where they are, and we've actually seen this just happened in Boston. A man was charged with the rape of a developmentally challenged woman. He was here illegally, and ICE asked the Boston authorities to turn him over for deportation. Not only did the authorities refuse to turn him over to immigration, their lax bail laws let him go free.
Well, let me just interject something about that. Anyone in Boston that votes for that numbnuts mayor is an idiot. And then it points again to the Ivy League indoctrination moron machine that they're turning out, because she is a abject idiot and a poster child for elitism. There you go. Speaking of elitism, real quick, they had the Davos meeting, basically elitists panicking, globalists that drink Chardonnay and have sushi and don't accomplish jack you know what. They're panicking over the possibility of a Trump return. Are you shedding any tears for them? John
No,
Kerry included?
not at all. They're worried because Trump is actually listening. And this is something that was interesting. Dean Phillips, who's the Democrat running against Joe Biden. Dean Phillips had a very interesting comment. He had an event that was right across the street from a Trump rally. So after his own event, he actually went over to the Trump rally to see what was going on. And his comment was, well, no wonder Trump is doing so well. Trump is actually listening to what the voters want. He's paying attention. He's not telling them what to do. He's listening to them and going along with what they are requesting. And that's what a politician is supposed to do.
Oh yeah, 100%. And do you think he has any legs in the future?
I don't know. I mean, it was an
I don't
odd
know either.
situation for him last night. I hope he manages to stay on at least until Super Tuesday, if not more, because I'd like him to ding up Biden. And, you mentioned the elites. And we're seeing more and more of these elites fall from grace. Of course, we spent several weeks talking about Claudine Gay and her, president of Harvard, and her plagiarism charges, not to mention her anti Semitism. But it turns out the problem at Harvard goes a lot deeper than this. The Dana Farber Cancer Center, which is affiliated with the Harvard School of Medicine, just had to retract 56 research papers on cancer research because um, the results were fabricated. They took the graphs in these reports and manipulated them in Photoshop to make them look like they said something they didn't. So you have an entire group, and these were research reports done by some of the highest ranking officials at Dana Farber. And they were called out by a British researcher. But so now we see the elite, not just of schools, but in medicine. And it turns out that, the party of science, no,
Hmm.
they're manipulating it. They don't care about the facts. They're trying to get money for research. They're trying to get their names out there. The elites have lost all credibility because they have forgotten what the Kennedys were always talking about, were always doing. That if you are in a place of privilege, it is your job to serve. It is your job to distribute opportunity, not just try to redistribute wealth.
I would agree in all that. And speaking of one of the biggest center points or focuses of modern day elitism, and I don't think it's all philanthropic. I believe it's about control. Is the whole uh, global warming, energy sector, and they're always pushing that. And the people in the Biden administration, obviously not Biden because he can't even put two sentences together anymore, have that whole EV not just push but almost mandates, and it's become a complete meltdown. We had a really severe winter or temperatures last week. What they basically were up to 30% efficiency with the cold weather. Plus, the bigger issue is people don't want them. They're rejecting them. There's only like 15% of people want them, yet the administration, just like the old Politburo of the Soviet Union, is just still pushing them. I mean, are they doing everything possible to alienate their electorate?
They think that their electorate is the wacko left. So no, they're not trying to alienate who they think their electorate is. But fortunately, their electorate is a small percentage of Americans, and they are alienating the rest of the country. Hertz made a big investment in EVs. And now they're finding they can't even rent these things because no one wants them. They're trying to sell them
Yeah,
for
because you're going on a trip, you're on a business trip, let's say New York to Philly. You really want to take that chance? You need to be at a meeting to be screwing around with an EV, and maybe or maybe not, you have a charging station? What if you're late to the
yeah,
meeting? What are you going to call the clients and say, I'm charging up right now. I'll be there in about an hour late? No, don't worry about it. There you go.
well, there was this great analogy. I believe it was the editor of the Wall Street Journal that wrote the op ed, but he was talking about he had rented a Tesla and he was driving 300 miles in it. And he said, the only way to describe the feeling is if you've ever forgotten your phone charger and you got nervous about how you were going to be able to charge your
Perfect.
phone and how, if it was
Perfect.
going to run out of. Now imagine that phone was your car and you needed this to absolutely run. He said it was a constant worry that if he was going to have enough juice to get to the next charging station. And the fact of the matter is, governors across the country are pushing back against this EV mandate, saying we do not have the infrastructure. And for those states like California who are starting to mandate EVs and say, after such and such a date, you're not even going to be allowed to buy a gas vehicle. Connecticut just got a government grant to buy electric school buses. I think we mentioned this last week.
That'll work out well. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
great. These kids are going to be learning via Zoom again because the electric school buses aren't going to run in the winter.
Listen, okay, again, there's a party of science, blah 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 blah. Okay, you're worried about greenhouse gas. How much do school buses, in aggregate, not individually, contribute to global warming? Maybe 0.00. You got about 5 minutes. 0.000. There you go. Wouldn't you? It's all about optics and indoctrination.
It
by
is.
The way.
If you actually look at the numbers, all of the cars in America over the course of a year actually contribute less to global warming than all of the private jet planes that just went to Davos.
There you go. But we don't need to know that, do we?
No, of course not. That's not important.
No.
I mean that's the key. You want to stop global warming? Yes, plant a whole bunch of trees because there's actual science that shows this helps. But stop these elites from using private jets. Let them fly commercial.
It's a very interesting point because my previous life, I was really into cars and used to fix my own cars and all this crap. So I had always have an interest, still do have an interest in cars. And something, if you really factor out I'll use the term clunkers, modern day cars have very little emissions. In other words, 90% of all car emissions are caused by 5% of the cars. How do you like that one?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And in fact, the construction of an electric vehicle, the construction of the car itself, the construction of the battery, actually causes more environmental damage than having a gas guzzling car on the road for 10 years. So the EVs,
but isn't it really?
The EVs are not going to solve global warming. They're not good for the environment. And we need to stop pretending that buying an EV is such a wonderful thing for the environment. It's not.
It's all about control, and it's not about the science. And actually, if they were really interested in curtailing global warming, they'd look at more hydrogen fuel cells and other alternatives besides EV. And if they're so great on humanitarianism and equity and inclusion and all that kind of shit, a lot of these batteries, the critical elements are mined in Africa with pretty much child labor, almost slave labor. But we don't need to know that, do we?
No, and the batteries are constructed in China. And ironically, the construction of the batteries, the factories that are building these batteries are all powered by coal.
Well, we don't need to know these facts. It's just important that Lurch, Mr. Kerry, goes on his private jet, and basically he's also a grifter. He's made all his money by marriage. How do you like that?
Wait a minute. We have to be accurate here. It's not his private jet, as he keeps reminding people.
Oh, you're right.
It's his wife's.
Right. Well, everything's his wife because the guy's only made $100 his whole life. He's been on the public dole forever. No, I mean, most guys, marriage doesn't go well, they get screwed, right? They went from the first class to the outhouse. Kerry's the only guy that's made a mega fortune on marrying. And where's his wife? I've never seen them together. Oh, well, that's another chapter, I guess. But yeah, I did. I hear an interesting commentary about Newt from Newt Gingrich. I'm sorry to say. I mean, I'm sorry to say is that yeah, it was really interesting. He's been wrong on various occasions, but his prediction, I like your comments on this, is that he believes that Trump's going to win in a landslide. And one of the things he mentioned or topics he mentioned was immigration, because you mentioned it before. It's not really fixable within the time frame of the next election. Okay, but beyond that, he also had a very interesting point that he had these indictments and prosecutions slash persecutions. He said if there was one of them, it probably would have stuck. But it became a caricature of itself. That's my words, not him. And it's basically helped Trump, not hurt. And especially if you factor in morons like the one in Letitia from New York, and then Fannie Willis from Georgia. It both EDI hires. But anyway, what do you think of that? Do you think he has a point?
He does have a point. If there had been one indictment against Trump and maybe criminal charges, that would have been very damaging because one case says, yes, we've got something, we're taking it to court, we've gone to the grand jury, we've done the investigation, we have facts. 30 or so different cases, most of which are civil. This says, okay, they're out to get him. And we've seen over and over, these cases are falling flat. So it's not just the number of cases. It's the fact that they were put together so bad, so poorly. And in fact, Alvin Bragg,
Oh, because they've been EDI hires of people doing them. Half of them, they're morons. Even Smith, who's not an EDI, he's an idiot too. He's an activist. He's not a judge or a prosecutor.
It's got nothing to do with DEI. The fact of the matter is, right now, the Georgia case is being scrutinized, not just because the prosecutor may have a conflict of interest, but as it turns out, the prosecutor was meeting with the Biden administration. So you're starting to see, wait a minute, there's actual coordination going on between these cases. If you have a solid court case, you're not coordinating it with other court cases unless they're all within your office and you're coordinating a docket and workflow and all of that. For the Biden
doesn't it also point to
for the Biden administration to say anything about this just shows that it is politically motivated.
Yeah, but doesn't it also, and Joe has said he had nothing to do with it. Yeah, there you go. But and he didn't make any money off Hunter. But anyway, doesn't it also point to his and his administration's stupidity? I mean, really having a paper trail? What are you, like a moron? That's a rhetorical question, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, we know that Biden has never been a Mensa candidate. And we know the people working for him are not Mensa candidates. No. It is absolutely amazing that they thought none of this was going to come out. And this goes back, I mean, again, Hillary thought she was going to get away with creating the Steele dossier. Oh, nobody will ever know that I was behind it. Oh, all we have to do is burn the email server. Nobody will ever find out. It always
very interesting. It's called being an elite.
It always comes out. And I was having a conversation with my wife earlier, and she brought up an interesting point. She's been watching these CNN documentaries, the 70s, the 80s. And in the 70s, they were talking about Watergate. And now, the entire country was aghast at Watergate. Richard Nixon had to resign over Watergate. When you get down to it, though, what Richard Nixon's and his people actually did was the same thing that Barack Obama's White House did to Donald 100%. Trump. They wiretapped.
Only he did it electrically.
Right. They wiretapped
there was no break-in.
the Trump. the Trump Tower. They wiretapped a presidential candidate. Where was the indictment? Where was the impeachment? Where was the outrage?
It's an
But
open question and a great question because there were none,
yeah,
really. I mean, by the way, Obama went on to make billions unscathed. I don't know how history's going to treat him. That's an open question. I don't think we'll be around when he maybe has his comeuppance. But yeah, he's one of the most dangerous figures in American presidential and overall history. How do you like that?
yeah. But I mean, it is amazing how when this was Nixon doing this, everybody was aghast. Republicans were aghast. Democrats,
Yes, they were.
everybody. Now the Democrats are doing the same things that they railed against. And it's like, oh no, it's okay because we're doing it for the greater good. No, you're not. You're doing it for your own political power, period.
And by the way, you have a great point about that. The greater good is a very scary notion. Yes, Stalin did it for the greater good. Other authoritarian thugs in history always Mao did it for the Great Leap Forward. That was all about the greater good. The greater good is a very scary concept.
Yeah, dictators always say what they're doing is for the greater good. And and that's another thing. The Democrats keep trying to paint Trump as a dictator. He's going to be a dictator. He's not going to leave office. Excuse me, he already left office. We've seen that. But they're yelling that Trump is going to be a dictator. Really? Who's the one trying to force electric vehicles on the public? Who's the one trying to get rid of kitchen appliances? Who's trying to control how you live and even what you think? This is all
And who
coming
you
from
vote for, taking Trump off the ballot.
taking
I mean,
Trump
you
off
don't
the
even have the
ballot,
opportunity to vote.
taking New Hampshire out of the primary uh, program.
Yeah, nothing to see here. Don't worry
Right.
about it. It's all. Don't worry about it.
They are acting as absolute dictators and trying to create a snow job on the American public, going, no, 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 he's the villain, not us. And
Well, they always talk about the Republicans being, non-college educated. I mean, talking Trump supporters. But when you really look at it, Democrats are much more easily led by shining objects,
with,
emotionally driven. How many times have you heard Hitler? I mean,
yeah,
you have cats called Hitler at this point. It's ridiculous already. It's not even taken seriously.
and actually,
Your comments.
if you take a look at the demographics of the recent polls, more and more college educated women,
True.
especially, but men as well, are voting for Trump. So
This came just so this is where they got to say this. We're just talking about the court cases. Special prosecutor Nathan Way basically spent $6,000 on luxury travel.
Yes,
Just another kink in that armor. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry, Dr. Loppin.
yeah. The fact of the matter is, none of what the
That's
Democrats have been doing withstands the scrutiny of daylight. The daylight is the ultimate disinfected. Well, when you shine a light on everything that the Democratic Party has been doing, and let me be very clear about this. I am talking about the Democratic elite in the DNC, the elected officials. I'm not talking about rank and file Democrats who have nothing to do with day to day politics and just go vote Democrat. I'm talking about party leaders. I'm talking about the folks in charge. All of the shit that they have pulled in the last 16 years cannot stand up to the light of day. And little by little, it is all falling apart and unraveling to the point that even the rank and file Democrats are going, no, you know what? I'm done. I cannot support this. Again, I didn't leave the party left me.
Yes, your initial point about Stewart, prime time of Bill Moore, real time. I'm sorry. It's happening. It's not just wishful thinking. It's happening. It's called a bridge too far, and I think Obama and Bernie, the self-hating Jew, are really some of the key drivers of this leaving the reservation. Your thoughts?
Sanders is definitely one of the key drivers. I think a lot of it, though, is has less to do with ideology and more to do about power. Pelosi doesn't want to give up her power. Hillary is still trying to grab on to power, even though she's never managed.
Oh no,
Schumer,
she's still
the,
hoping against hope. Yes, there's no question.
yes,
Go ahead.
Schumer is still trying to hold on to his power. But the problem is that their day has come and gone. And what the Democratic Party, what the Democratic rank and file want is the Democratic Party of the Kennedys. They
Yes.
want that hope. They want, remember, Obama's entire campaign was hope and change. We're going to promote hope and change. And there was no hope, and everybody, and it changed, but not for the better. He went in the wrong
No one was left
direction.
with any change. There you go.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, no
Nobody
change
had
in the
any.
pocket. There you go.
Yes. Nobody had any hope, and nobody had any change.
Well, speaking of no change, that is the monetary version. We have inflation in December was again back at 3.4% on top of an already horrific figures, and plus leading economic indicators were also in a downward trend. Your thoughts, Dr. Lopkin?
Yeah, the economy right now is in a very precarious place. We talked about this previously. The jobs numbers that have been reported were inflated. They were all reduced downwards, but the media never covered those downward revisions. So the economy was not as strong as Biden makes people think. We're seeing now, I mean, just in the last week
Can
and
I
a half.
interject one thought?
Go ahead.
Well, do you think Biden makes people think anything?
Well,
I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
it's
There you,
but
there you go. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'd say just in the past week and a half, we have seen layoffs from Amazon, from eBay, from the LA Times. From there's more and more coming every day. So
Well, you even have layoffs at the Democratic Socialist
yes,
Association or organization.
the Democratic Socialists of America have
There
announced
you
that
go.
they now this is for those of our listeners that may not be familiar with them. This is the group that backs AOC and the Squad. This is a national political movement, and they are right now suffering a $2 million deficit. And they announced
They're not good at matching money.
no.
That's why they're socialists.
They are considering laying off, but even their
Oh,
layoff plans, they have stated they're going to cut $500,000 in staff related costs. Well, that's great, but it's only a quarter of what your deficit is. And what's even better, to show you where the country really is, that you don't get the sense of on mainstream media, the reason that they are suffering this financial crisis is because their donations dried up after October 7th, when they started pushing the Palestinian agenda, when they started funding pro Hamas protests. People stopped giving them money. So they were spending money getting these protesters together, but their income dried up because America is not pro Palestine. They're not pro terrorist. And for the most part,
they're not pro Hamas.
Yeah, they're not pro Hamas. And for the most part, despite what we've seen by very high level people, they're not anti Semites.
I would agree with all of that, thank God. But speaking of anti Semitism, West Hartford, a town I grew up in, which was primarily Jewish at one point, very still a very heavily Jewish population. They had a pro-Palestinian march, and there was some vandalism at some local establishments, a bank for one. And why do I bring that up? Because I'm sorry to say, sometimes, payback's a bitch. And all those liberal Jews and their ideology and their political stances in West Hartford, we have need open borders, and, everyone's, has a voice and all that crap, right? When chickens have kind of come home to roost, haven't they? Your thoughts, Dr. Lopkin?
Yeah, what happened in West Hartford is indicative of what's been happening all over the country. And the fact of the matter is, if you take a look at the pro Palestinian protests, an inordinately large number of them, I'm not saying all, but an amazingly large number of them resulted in vandalism and violence. None to date, as far as my research can tell, and I've been looking, not one pro Israel protest ended in violence or vandalism. And this is something that people have gotten a little too soft hearted on this, because I actually heard a representative of a Jewish organization from Hartford commenting on what happened in West Hartford. And he said, well, it was a peaceful protest and they have the right to do that. No, vandalism is not peaceful protests. Vandalism is violence. It doesn't matter that a person isn't hurt. Destruction of property is not peaceful. And we
Yeah,
need
but
to
but
be.
they see it's a bigger issue, Dr. Lopkin. It's these idiot liberal Jewish idiots, and they are idiots. Okay, they're basically signing on to their own death warrants through their stupid ideologies and their stupid allegiances to outdated parties and ideologies. Sorry.
Yeah, and especially in this election, this is something that they need to take a good look at, because right now, the Biden administration is trying to push Israel into a ceasefire. You never hear Joe Biden talking about this, but there are talks going on between Qatar, I believe Saudi Arabia, and the US, trying to push Israel to pull back and have a ceasefire and stop their attacks. But the fact of the matter is, and I can't claim credit for saying this. I don't remember who it was, but they pointed out, if Hamas ceases fire, there will be peace. If Israel ceases fire, there will be the destruction of the Jewish people.
100%.
And
Yep,
this
absolutely.
is the problem. Israel cannot stop because Hamas refuses to allow Israel to exist. They were talking about a two-state solution just a few days ago. And Hamas said, no, there will be no two-state solution. We are going to destroy the Jews. This is
I
why
didn't see that on CNN. I didn't see it on CNN though. What happened?
No, of
Did I
course
miss it?
not. And this
Oh,
is
okay.
why Netanyahu had said, we are going to continue until Hamas is destroyed. Now, pay attention to the difference in the language. Hamas is talking about destroying all Jews. Netanyahu and Israel are talking about destroying Hamas, not
A
Palestine.
terrorist
Yes,
organization.
not all Palestinians, not committing genocide. They are eliminating terrorists. This is the
Yes.
difference.
But flipping out this for a second about the whole, if you will, domestic Jewish question. I saw a documentary on fascism in the United States, and it was really interesting because we were talking about the Jewish reaction, and I didn't really know this. I knew there were some distinguished Jewish boxers, but now most boxers are African American, maybe Hispanic. But back in the 30s, the majority of boxers are actually Jewish. They were proud Jews. They wore the Star of David on their boxing trunks. And the interesting thing about it is it's not about boxing, is they had a group and it was called the Wrecking Crew. And when the fascists and Nazis had their little rallies, these Jews went in there and beat the shit out of them. And why is that kind of struck me when I was watching it? Because then you have limp dick Jews like the one saying, well, it was a peaceful demonstration in West Hartford. How do we get here?
Oh,
Blumenthal, Schumer,
I'll tell you.
Bernie Sanders, the list goes on.
I'll tell you exactly how we got here. Because those Jews in the 30s that fought, that would not put up with anti Semitism, would not put up with fascism. These are the Jews that relocated to Israel when Israel was founded. And the folks that stayed behind were not the fighters. It's the same thing that happened here in America with Europe. I've heard Stephen Fry was talking about this. Just in case there's anyone who's not familiar with Stephen Fry, he's a British actor, very intelligent. And he has talked about the fact that the big difference between Europe and America is Americans were the ones that said, you know what? There's got to be something better. We're going to go find it. While the people that stayed behind in Europe were the folks that said, things are good enough. We don't need to risk anything. So you have that difference in culture between Europe and America. The same thing went on with the Jews that moved to Israel after Israel's founding and the ones that stayed behind. And a lot of the folks that emigrated to the US were Jews that had been beaten down by the Nazis in Europe and who were just, they didn't want to, they literally had the fight beaten out of them.
Interesting. I think it's a great point and definitely worth further discussion. On a more, let's say, relaxed venue, I think it's, and hopefully we'll have some entrepreneur might take us up on this. So at Rutgers, they had a bunch of anti-Semitic, pro-Palestinian rallies, a bunch of spoiled brats protesting. And I thought with my pea brain, what a great idea to have a website called don'thire.com. And what it does is takes pictures of these geniuses with their names below them. So entrepreneurs this site before they do the actual hiring and see if they're about to hire a moron. What do you think of this?
I think you need to reach out to Bill Ackman. I think he would be willing to fund that.
I think
Yeah,
it's a brilliant idea. If I do say so myself,
it is
it's
a
called
great
don'thire.com.
Yes, it is a great idea. And the fact of the matter is, yes, you have freedom of speech in America, but there are also consequences. And if you are spouting anti Semitism, if you are pro terrorist, yeah, you are not going to be the type of person that we want in a business. We don't want you, poisoning corporate culture. So,
And maybe there'll be consequences for these spoiled son of a bitches if they do end up on don'thire.com. Karma's a bitch, isn't it, Dr. Lopkin?
it is. And actually, we're starting to see that blowback. A number of Wall Street firms, law firms have all stopped hiring from these elite universities that pushed anti Semitism and coddled the pro Palestine movement. So you're starting to see it, but you're seeing it with wide swaths. Something like what you're talking about would be a lot more targeted. And
What would let me say? I can interject one thing. What would happen if little Buffy and Skippy, right after their parents paid a shitload of money on a worthless education, end up on don'thire.com? How funny would that be? That would be awesome.
yeah,
Gee, son, doesn't look like your prospects are all that great now, are they?
And that's something else. I would love to hear from some of the parents of these students who have had job offers rescinded because they were stupid enough to spout anti Semitism. I think either one, the parents will be outraged at how stupid their kid is and how much money they wasted, or
Would they demand
B,
a refund from these
or
idiot schools or what?
or
Go ahead.
B,
Just
they're
kidding.
going to be proud because they're anti-Semites and that's where the students learned it.
Yeah, a lot of times the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Now, speaking of stupidity, this is an elitism. It's a both. How do you like that? Two things, two birds in one stone, Dr. Lopkin. Um, Sports Illustrated. I used to get that when I was a kid. I used to read it. All my friends read it, right? And even when I was an adult, the bathing suit edition. Yeah, I'm on board with that. So through wokeism and insanity, Sports Illustrated. And how do you f that one up? But that's another discussion. Basically, has gone to basically AI to produce their magazine that no one reads anymore. Yeah, when you have a 400-pound transvestite as your calendar girl, that might be a problem. I'm sorry, calendar person. And they've laid off 100% or close to 100% of their staff. And then we also have, in spite of themselves, because of previous generations, the NFL is signed on once again to have the Black National Anthem. That's called inclusion, not division. Yeah, okay. It's going to be played at the Super Bowl. Your thoughts on that, Dr. Lopkin, please?
Well, the Sports Illustrated case, Sports Illustrated is about to go out of business unless they can find
Yes.
somebody else to publish. Just to give a little bit of the background on what's going on, the magazine was so mismanaged, it's no longer published by the original publisher. It was actually licensed. And the folks that were running it went so far afield that they can't afford the licensing fees anymore. They're losing money hand over fist. So they're going to be shutting down altogether unless they can find somebody else to pay for the licensing. So they're done. And this was go woke, go broke. If they had stuck to actual sports, they probably would have done better. But the problem is that actual sports aren't sticking to actual sports, as you just mentioned with the NFL. And no, despite what mainstream media wants you to believe, there is no black national anthem. There is a song that events are playing to kowtow to an African American audience, but it is not a national anthem. There is no black nation. Blacks, whites, Hispanic, we are all part of the same nation. We have the same national anthem. And unless we stop this divisive bullshit and start working together, none of this is going to get any better.
No, it's not how you bring a country together. You talk about that, or what I saw, the fascism thing. Yeah, there were divisions in America now, but we came together. If this goes on, this crap goes on too much longer. I mean, I don't know if we can ever come together in a national crisis, but that's another issue. Let's conclude with your thoughts on should Nikki Haley bail or not.
Yeah, I've been a big supporter of Nikki Haley. I've talked about that on this podcast. I think she is incredibly qualified to be president. She does not have the backing. She cannot win the nomination at this point. And all she's doing is forcing Trump to divert resources from the general election. I'm sorry to say this. She says, well, it's an election, not a coronation. Nobody has coronated Donald Trump. Donald Trump fought to get to this point. You have seen.
I agree 100%. Real quick, just real quick, one thing about that as well, and I'd love your comments, I'm sure our listeners would as well, is that if she goes to South Carolina and loses by 30, then she's going to blow any equity she's now accumulated. She's really at a pinnacle,
Yes.
and in a good point. Don't f it up. Your thoughts. Sorry, go
Yes,
ahead.
if she were to pull out now and endorse Donald Trump before South Carolina, then she's got political equity to run again in 4 years. If she gets blown out of the water in her home state, her political career is done. And we've already seen Tim Scott, who is senator from South Carolina. He's backing Trump. Vivek Ramaswamy is backing Trump. DeSantis is backing Trump. They know that the important part of this election is not to beat Trump, it's to beat Biden. And they knew that all they were doing was diverting resources from that fight.
Absolutely. And plus, another situation is that if she bows out, then basically Trump can get what is called consolidate the RNC's resources because now there is no challenger. That's another big point.
Yes. And that's important because the DNC has already consolidated their resources against Trump. They're ignoring Dean. They don't even think they have a primary. So they've already got all of the guns trained on Trump. Nikki Haley at this point is just getting in the way. She should save her political capital. Assuming Trump wins the presidency, he cannot run again in 4 years. He will be term limited out. That is her opportunity to build on what Trump will create to hopefully stop some of the divisiveness. But now she's just falling prey to dividing more because of her attacks on Trump.
Yeah, I think she's going to burn any bridges. Right now, she's pushing the envelope. If she pulls back, she's fine. It's all copacetic, kumbaya, and everything will be fine. Well, Dr. Lopkin, I thought, a very good exchange on this show. And we've been on a roll lately. Listeners can contribute to the show, can't they?
Yes, they can. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Go to the Carnivore Radio Facebook page. Send us a message and let us know what you think. You can also get a hold of us at xvadio.com/connect. Let us know your thoughts. And of course, you can hear every episode of Carnivore Radio at xvadio.com, the Carnivore Radio website, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin. Looking forward to next week.
We'll see you then.